Good morning. Welcome into Let's Bet It, presented by Superbook Sports. I'm Mark Zinno, joined by Jared Smith here on this Tuesday afternoon. A jam-packed show for you guys. Our good friend Tim Murray from VSiN is going to join us here on the show as well. We'll react to Monday Night Football. We'll look at stock up, stock down, some college football futures as well, and, of course, our plays of the day. Make sure you download the Pickswise app, available on Apple stores and Google Play, as well. Subscribe to the Pickswise YouTube channel. Leave your comments right down there at the bottom. We'll get to as many of them as we can. Let us know what games you're on, what questions you have, and we will address as many of them as possible. Jared, happy Tuesday. My Giants took their first loss last night. It was expected, but I still, my feelings on the Giants are trending upward. They're competitive, and I think that's step one.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the issue is just overall wide receiver help. They seem to just make so many mistakes. Like, I don't put that loss on Daniel Jones at all. I thought the offense was called very crisply by Brian Dable. I thought the Giants moved the football effectively. They bogged down in the red zone. They had blocked field. I mean, think about it. They had blocked field goals. They had drops. Yeah. They had no turnovers till the last drive of the game. Really, that game should have been a lot closer and a lot higher scoring, frankly, than it was. I thought both teams moved it effectively. And I thought Dallas's offense with Cooper Rush, I thought looked pretty good too. It's just some of these games, some of the minute details about game management clearly are off with a lot of these teams. Maybe it's just because there's no preseason, so we're kind of in the third week of preseason, I guess. And maybe in the middle of the season, those things will be cleaned up. But kickers and drops seem to be the story of football season so far.
Yeah, and let's just take a moment to pause and put some respect in the fact that the Kenny Golladay contract the Giants gave out is one of the worst contracts I've seen to any in all of sports, just based off of the fact that not only how bad he is, that the guy's completely unavailable most of the time. Like, it's just awful, and it's he's gone after this year. I can't envision a scenario where he's still on the team.
I read that they're willing to – Albert Breer tweeted out about an hour ago, quote, Giants more than willing to take on a significant chunk of the salary to move Kenny Golladay before the roster cut down. I wouldn't be shocked if he's not even on the team in a few weeks.
Yeah, well, trade deadline comes up, middle of October? So I think after week 6, so we're about halfway home in the NFL. So, again, Cowboys beat the Giants 23-16 last night. Cooper Rush, this is what you're going to get out of him, man. Like, here's what you have to remember about the Cowboys going forward from a betting perspective. Especially when they're an underdog. Cooper Rush is going to keep you in the game. If he plays mistake-free football, he might not get you over the top to win it, but he's certainly not going to lose it for you. And Daniel Jones last night, kind of the same thing. Like you said, didn't really win it for the Giants. Had the one interception towards the end of the game there, but other than that, not losing it for you. So you're looking at two teams that, particularly when they are dogs, are probably going to stay within one score. So if you're getting that 2.5 line, which is what the Giants and Cowboys opened up at, it was the perfect spot to tease the Cowboys to 8.5 or 9.5, whatever it may be, whatever the number was, or 7.5 and 8.5, I should say. Because if the Giants were going to win that game, you knew they weren't winning it by more than a touchdown.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Cooper Rush right now, I mean, I'm looking at the week 3 grades. He's in the top half. He's ahead of Patrick Mahomes, ahead of Goff, ahead of Brady, ahead of Brissett, ahead of Cousins, ahead of Ryan in the, nerd numbers of how these guys performed in week 3. He is a top half, maybe let's call him average quarterback in terms of what the metrics are telling us. And if you throw in the fact that Dallas, I think, has some pretty good weapons on the outside if they can ever get Michael Gallup back and if CeeDee Lamb pulls his head out of his ass, like, they've got some dudes on the outside. Zeke looked good. Pollard looked good. I know Zeke is kind of a plotter at this stage, but on 3rd and goal at the 1, I would trust him to get the 1. And I just think overall there might be a little, I don't want to say quarterback controversy, but Dallas is going along pretty steady right now with Cooper Rush. It's not a massive drop-off like everyone expected. So we'll see what happens in a few weeks. Here, let's just leave it at this. If I'm the Cowboys, I'm not rushing Dak Prescott back. I'm letting him take his sweet time and make sure he's perfectly healthy because there isn't this big trade-off going from Dak to Cooper.
By the way, very difficult to catch when your head is up your ass. Probably don't recommend it staying there all that long if you'd like to have a positive All right, let's look at some stock up, stock down here. Starting in the AFC again. This is all NFL here. Dolphins are now plus 230 to win the AFC East after their win over the Buffalo Bills. Raiders plus 1100 to win the AFC West at 0-3 is the only winless team left. My Raiders, God, I've invested so much into them emotionally. I'm not even a Raiders fan, but I for some reason I want to see that team do well. And you have the Jaguars at plus 225 to win the AFC South, which is the only bet I'd make at this point in time.
Yeah, I don't mind. Listen, I think the Jaguars are an interesting team. I think the defensive metrics on them are popping, and that is not something I expected. Through 3 weeks, they're a top 10 defense. Never expected that.
Well,
the Raiders, they have, but considering how bad they were last year, I mean, they're actually top 10. I'm not giving them enough credit. They're through 3 weeks, they have the third best EPA per play of any defense in the league. And they're really good against the run, like really good against the run. That's very surprising. They have the lowest rushing success rate allowed in football this year through 3 weeks, 27%. I think the Raiders are a straight sell at this point. Josh McDaniels is a disaster. And I don't think, as good as their offense is, their defense is terrible. And I think that's going to be what hinders them more than offensive line play or, inefficient quarterback play. Because, listen, Derek Carr can still sling it, and they're throwing it pretty well on offense, but they can't stop a nosebleed. The Dolphins, I think, are a hold for me. They've got a really tough game their defense was on the field for 90 plays on Sunday, and Tua's got the back issue, and they've got to turn around and play a short week in Cincinnati, and the Bengals defense is humming right now. You want to say what you want about the Bengals offense. They have not played very well. The Bengals defense is playing well, and I think this is going to be a really tough matchup for Tua and the Dolphins this Thursday. I would wait to bet any Dolphins numbers because if they lose that game, that number is going to decrease. And I think that is probably a better buy low spot than buying the Dolphins right now, which is kind of the peak of the market. Here's what I'll say, though. Your Atlanta Falcons are starting to intrigue me a little bit in the NFC South. Listen, the NFC South is wide open.
They're not going to win it.
Why not? The Saints are banged up. The Bucs are banged up. I'm not saying they should win it, but their number right now is at a point where they have no chance. They're not a chance to win it. But the NFC South, there's a little weakness right now in the NFC South. Carolina can't trust them at all. So
Tampa Bay
it's an interesting handicap.
I think by week 6, when Tampa Bay is healthy and has everybody back, they're going to be the juggernaut you expect them to be. Their offense is this bad right now.
23-1 to win the division, though. It's a very big price. I wish they got that game against New Orleans in week 1. That I would have felt differently about them if they won that game.
Sure. But again, they're going to be a great spread team. They're going to be the Lions from last year, and a lot of people have put that out there. But they'll be a plus spread team. If you're getting more than a field goal with the Falcons this year,
I like them this week as a home dog against the Browns.
It's going to be an interesting spot. 2 really run-heavy teams to start this game. Let's see who plays better. Now, again, you have two. You have one really good roster versus one really bad roster that's very well coached. The Falcons is the latter of those two, and who knows how that game's going to play out. I think it'll kind of be brute force on brute force, if you will. But I do want to return to the Dolphins for 1 second.
Sure.
As far as this Thursday night deal is concerned, if you look at Miami and you look at the 12 quarters of football that they've played, for all the bluster and everything that we're talking about, they've played one good offensive quarter against the Ravens. Other than that, they scored 14 offensive points against the Patriots and 21 offensive points. One of those things gifted to them by the Buffalo Bills. So explain to me, other than that, where this offense that we keep going gaga over has played really well. Because I'm not – that's the only reason I'm hesitant to back them this week against Cincinnati. Is because I haven't really seen any level of consistency. But as you pointed out, Cincinnati's defense has not been anything to shake a stick at.
No, I think the Bengals defense has been playing pretty well. At least that's what the numbers are telling me. The numbers tell me that the Bengals defense is a top 5 unit through 3 weeks. And again, say that for what you will. That's what the nerd numbers tell me. I'm looking at it right now. EPA per play, they're a top 5 unit.
The problem is, and this is what we're going to find out this week in this matchup, they played the offensively inept Steelers, the hurt Cowboys without Dak Prescott, and the offensively inept Jets. So they haven't played an offense yet that actually is competent. Is the Dolphins' offense competent? I don't think we absolutely know that. We watched one quarter of them go bonkers, and all of a sudden it's like, well, clearly this is a team that's going to win the division. No, I think it's a little bit. I think we're still pushing the Dolphins a little bit higher than we need to.
I mean, I'm doing some of the quarter breakdowns right now. They're a little better in the first half than the second half, but I don't see a huge gap with the analytics on Miami's offense. Right now, through 3 weeks, they have the most efficient offense in the NFL. I know our eyes might tell us something differently, but I'm just reporting the numbers, Mark. Through 3 weeks, they have the most efficient offense in the league.
But hold on, for the audience, measure the efficiency. What does that mean when you're saying efficient?
EPA per play, expected points added. Every play, there is a grade given to it on how many expected points that play is supposed to develop. For example, the pick 6 for the Chargers-Chiefs game was like a -13 because the expected points were a touchdown on one end, and it ended up being a touchdown on the other end. So that is graded out plus minus. Some teams are plus EPA per play. There's about 10, 11 teams in the NFL right now, 12 actually, that are plus EPA per play on offense through 3 weeks. The rest of them are minus, meaning every time you run a play on offense, is it added points or subtracting points? Right now, through 3 weeks, the Dolphins, the Chiefs, the Ravens, the Eagles, the Bills have the 5 most efficient offenses in the league. I think it's based on what we're looking at with the other 4 teams, Chiefs, Ravens, Eagles, Bills. You could say, yes, absolutely, efficient offense. What I'm telling you is the Dolphins on paper are a little better than maybe what our eyes are telling us. Okay. That's it.
Listen, I'm not debating that. I'm just telling you that if they don't have that fourth quarter against the Ravens that they do, I think we view them optically differently than where they are. Sure. And I think the odds are reflecting that a little bit. But again, the Cincinnati Bengals haven't really done anything to impress anybody yet either. So,
no. They're dogs this week. Listen, I think the Dolphins are going to lose this week. I do. It's 3.5 now. That line's pushed through a key number. I think it's fair to say the Dolphins are going to lose this week, and I think that's why the odds maybe are a little reflective of that. And then from there, we see where they fall. And then maybe at that point, they're a good buy low.
Last week because Josh Allen made 2 critical mistakes that he almost never makes.
They shouldn't have won that game last week. No, they're very fortunate to be 2-1. I don't disagree with you there. They are very fortunate to be 2-1.
So, all right, over to the NFC here, Jared. Let's look at a couple of teams. Cowboys to win the NFC East now plus 380. Eagles are plus 350 to win the NFC. Then they're the favorites for that matter, which didn't see that one coming. No, I didn't. 49ers plus 150 to win the NFC West. So those are some odds that are moving right now in the NFC. Any of those intrigue you?
The Niners. I mean, what have we seen from the Rams so far that makes me think that they're a runaway freight train in the NFC West? Why are the Rams odds-on favorites in week 4 to win a division when they have looked awful at times? They got blasted in week 1 by the Bills. They almost blew a 28-3 lead to the Falcons. Their defense is getting shredded. Right now, they are outside. Their defensive efficiency through 3 weeks, they are the 5th worst defensive efficiency team in the NFL through 3 weeks. This is the Los Angeles Rams with Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey, people. And I know they faced the Bills, but they also faced the Cardinals that are just, wackadoos, and the Falcons. Now, you could say that those 2 teams might be a little undervalued offensively, which is fair, especially Atlanta. But I'm surprised. I mean, goodness gracious, dropback success rate almost 50% allowed for LA. This is a team with the best cover corner in the league. So I think there's weakness there. And say what you want about Jimmy G, you're not buying the top of the market here. And Arizona and Seattle are throwaways, I think. It's a 2-team race between LA and San Francisco, and I'm getting almost 2-1 on the Niners, who have a better defense, I think, right now at this stage. I would consider that.
I would still consider the Cowboys at the number that they are to win the NFC East. I mean,
sure.
I know all the reasons to believe in Philadelphia. And is this a 12-5, 13-4 kind of team. Maybe. You know, the Lions keeping up with them in week one was a little bit disconcerting. They've played two really good defensive games the last 2 weeks, and 24 points a game is not terrible. But the Vikings and Commanders are both very middle of the road defensive teams, at least at this point coming into the year. So when they start, they're going to get a real tough test this week defensively with the Jaguars. I'm curious to see how this one plays out. I'm curious to see how well they can operate.
Cowboys Jags this week.
Yeah.
Eagles Jags. Eagles Jags this week.
Eagles Jags.
That game is very fascinating. I agree. Yeah. I don't want to bet. I actually don't want to bet that game, but I very much want to watch it.
Want to watch that game, exactly.
Yeah.
I think that's really the critical part of it. All right, let's turn our attention here to college football and look at some futures. Let's welcome in a man that you and I both know very well from VSiN, the Vegas Stats Information Network. Tim Murray joins us here on Let's Bet It this morning. The DC native, look at you. You're tall, you're gorgeous. It's great to see you, Tim.
Zeno, you need to be my hype man. I'm all in, man. This is awesome.
Love it.
Great to see you, brother. Great to have you here on the show. A lot of college football stuff to get to here as we start to look at the possibilities of the college football playoff. Now, I'm still disagreeing with our producer, Jacob, for keep saying who's the fourth team, because I don't think Alabama is a lock to make the college football playoff like some other people do. So I'm putting Georgia in, and I'm putting Ohio State in. So I'll ask you, who are the next two teams for you that you think are most likely to make the college football playoff?
Yeah, it's a fascinating question because if Alabama does trip up, like you mentioned, Mark, in the regular season, then they have to obviously win the SEC championship against an Alabama. So I still would lean towards Alabama. I think the fascinating one, as I clear my throat, excuse me. I think the fascinating one, guys, is Michigan. Is Michigan capable of going 11-0? And if they lose a close game to Ohio State, what does the committee look? How does the committee look at Michigan? So you have them. I'm just not fully buying in on USC yet. I think they have some warts. I thought the defense actually played pretty well this weekend against Oregon State, and they continue to turn the teams over at a ridiculous rate. 14 turnovers already this year. So whatever Alex Grinch is doing, that bend but don't break defense. But I still think they have enough issues out there. The road game at Utah is going to be a tricky spot there for them. And then you look at the ACC. Clemson's still undefeated, but I'll be honest, guys. I was taken aback a bit by the struggles they had defensively. I know Wake Forest is a talented team offensively, but I think that Clemson team has a lot of issues. So long-winded answer to answer your question, Zeno, is I would still say Alabama's in good shape, even though they do have a really tough stretch there in the month of October here coming up. And if they're 12-0 going to the SEC championship, lock them up, obviously in. I think the biggest question is Michigan. Does Michigan take care of business against Jared's alma mater, Penn State, who continues to look pretty well? That game's at home, so that's something to look at. So I think that's kind of the fascinating one there for me.
Yeah, there's really only two teams right now in the country that are top 10 in EPA per play, both offense and defense. One of them's Michigan. The other one's Minnesota. So take that for what you will. Georgia right now outside the top 10 in EPA per play on defense. Is that surprising to you at this point, Tim? Because we're talking about their defense being, I know they're replacing a lot of starters, but let's be honest, it's the identity of the team. But it's really been their offense that's been the better unit, at least efficiency-wise so far this year. Is that going to be a problem, you think, going forward if Georgia's defense isn't as buttoned up as we've seen in years past, most notably last year when they won the national title?
Yeah, it's hard sometimes, and I use those similar stats too, Jared. And I think early on you can utilize stats, whether it be to make your case for something you're betting on or to push it against. So look, I think at the end of the day, you look at Oregon. Is Oregon a perfect team? Of course not. They were very fortunate to win this weekend against Washington State. However, I look at that performance, I mean, still to this point of the season, in my eyes, guys, I think the win that Georgia had and the fashion that they did it over Oregon in week 1 is the most impressive data point so far this year. So it doesn't worry me yet, but I think this year there's some 2007 vibes going on this year in college football. I mean, if people recall, I mean, that was one of the craziest years, a year that Missouri, Kansas, South Florida, all these teams. I don't know who those teams are. I'm not saying that someone's going to come out of nowhere, even though we do have the resurgence of Kansas at 4-0. But I do think there is some unique aspects to this year where I said it coming in. And, to Mark's point about Alabama, they are not certainly a flawless team. They've got issues. We need to find those playmakers. I mean, they're very fortunate. A couple calls go against them and at Texas and what are we talking about right now with Alabama? So, Alabama gets the ultimate pass for me. And, Mark, I think ultimately you have a very good chance of being correct that, let's just not write Alabama in. It was like when, the Patriots were in the midst of their, incredible era and people were just really trying to find, this is it. This is the end of the Patriots. And then they win the Super Bowl. So I'm just not going to count on Alabama because it's just Alabama. And it's at this point silly to do.
Well, and I would add, in reference to Jared's question about Georgia, that defensive efficiency will not matter until the SEC championship game in which they'll be undefeated. Could you argue maybe the Tennessee game, but who knows what Tennessee is going to be at that point in time? They play them second to last or third to last game of the regular season, and they play Kentucky, which is not a high-level offense, despite Will Levis being a really good quarterback. But they just don't have anything in their schedule that can press them enough. And in reality, for Georgia, when are they playing from behind that they need their defense to be playing high level? Right? Find me a spot where they're genuinely going to be behind at anybody at this point in the year.
Unless
until the middle
Florida
of
gets off to a hot start in the cocktail party. That's the only, and Richardson goes nuts. Like, to me, I could see a world where he goes crazy. I mean, he went crazy in Rocky Top. There's no reason why he can't go crazy against Georgia.
And I mean, Tim, I guess I could see, it's kind of crazy, thinking about the performance that Mississippi State had against LSU. Are they really capable of beating Georgia? Probably not. But, Will Rogers has been in that Leach system for three years. I think Mississippi State's an intriguing bet this weekend, guys. Hosting Texas A&M as Texas A&M keeps figuring out ways these last couple of weeks to get these wins. Mississippi State is laying 3.5 against Texas A&M. So yeah, I mean, once again, you look at the schedule, and especially with a team like Georgia, who's recruited at the level that they've recruited at, it's hard to envision, especially in that schedule, where they're getting tripped up. Kentucky is a top 10 team now, Mark, but as you mentioned, is that offense good enough to really stress a Georgia defense with that many playmakers? I would say no, but over time, you keep playing these games back to back. Mississippi State on the road, then you go to Lexington, which is has a chance of being the biggest game in school history. Down there in Lexington, who knows what's going to happen? But yeah, it's hard for me to envision Georgia getting tripped up, this year. But we're only a quarter of the way into this season.
Let's turn our attention.
The game against Kent State was interesting. Sorry, Mark. I just wanted to follow up with that game against Kent State. Like, do we raise any red flag at all about that?
No, I was at the game and I watched it. That whole first half plays out differently if Ladd McConkey doesn't fumble a punt, doesn't drop a pass, doesn't fumble after another reception, and then drop another one. Like, he literally was the reason. And I'm not banging on the young man because he's a big part of what Georgia does. But if he makes those plays that he routinely makes, that first half is 28-0 in the blink of an eye. It just is. Like, they made a ton of mistakes.
Yeah, no, I didn't watch a second of the game, so I have no context except the final score on the box.
I was in Sanford Stadium for it. I mean, it was, poor kid was getting booed by his own fan base, but, I think that game plays out differently. And again, the bugaboo, Jared, for Georgia's defense statistically this year has been the passing defense, not the run defense. And to go back to your point about Kentucky, Tim, that what does Kentucky do better than anybody? That's run the football. Good luck running into the teeth of the Georgia defense. So it's going to be all on Will Levis in that game to make a to make an impact. But let's turn our attention to the Heisman race here. And you look at some of the odds that are out there. Still Stroud, CJ Stroud, the odds-on favorite. Bryce Young right behind him. And then you get the Caleb Williams, which is, I think, fascinating. Again, I am not surprised his odds have shot where they are. If these two guys were still in Oklahoma putting up the numbers they did, everyone would be like, okay, we expect this. I don't know why we didn't expect it when they went to USC, but that's a different conversation. Then you have Hendon Hooker and Stetson Bennett coming in at 16-1. So where do you see the Heisman race going, and is there value on somebody that you like?
It's hard to see. I mean, let's start with Caleb Williams. At the end of the day, the Heisman race, unless you are Lamar Jackson or Johnny Manziel, which we don't have, at least at this point in the season. And remember a couple of years ago, I guess it was almost a decade ago, Lamar Jackson had that game against Florida State that kind of catapulted him into like oh wow, here's Lamar Jackson. He could win the Heisman Trophy, and then he just went on a tear. And ultimately, the losses to Clemson and Houston for Louisville that year didn't really matter because he had run away with it. But at the end of the day, it's kind of come down to, guys, who is the best player on a playoff team. And, Caleb Williams, he was off on Saturday night in Corvallis, but that offense, man, they just have so many weapons, and he is a dynamic player. And Jared and I were texting. I mean, he does not go down. I mean, he is a guy that just, people just bounce off him in the backfield. So, depending on where he's at, 6-7-1, I still think it's too short because I envision a loss or two coming for USC. So, the Jalen Daniels discussion is fun, but what is Kansas going to be at the end of the day? Are his numbers gaudy enough? I would say no. Hendon Hooker, like you mentioned, Mark, he's really talented, but are his numbers, as that big? So it's hard for me to kind of figure out where the value is. I took a shot, I think Jared did too, on JJ McCarthy. Could it ultimately happen? I guess. I mean, it's still, when is it coming? He's got to have those big games there for Michigan. So, looking at someone who's on a team that has a chance in your eyes, whatever that team may be, to make it to the playoff, I think is a way to look. And you look at CJ Stroud, he's still some, plus money out there. Look, it's still September. I'm not ready to play the favorite guys, and I'm sure you guys are the same way. But CJ Stroud, it feels like Ohio State is now getting into gear, dropping a 52 spot on Wisconsin, 77 last week against Toledo. They're starting to get into that, we're going to obliterate everybody in our path. Yeah. And ultimately, it's going to come down to, do they win the Big Ten? Because he's going to put up those big-time numbers.
It's time to start doing Ohio State. Time to start doing Ohio State team total overs every week, guys. If it's under 40, go hammer it. I mean, that's the easiest bet you can make right now.
Yeah, and their next 3 weeks, Rutgers, Michigan State, Iowa at home. I mean, say what you want about Iowa's defense, but I would be shocked if there isn't at least another 50-burger or two dropped into that sequence, and then they go to Happy Valley on October 29th. Hopefully it's Halloween, and we get the, Freddy Krueger CJ Stroud, and not the one that's been the assassin just running through the rest of the Big Ten for the last 2 years. All right, let's get into this week. Contrarian Murray's already got his pencil out, and he's ready to go. So what are the ugly spots on the board this week, bud?
There's a couple. Does anyone else want to back Iowa with me?
No, but that's what we have to do, right? We have to.
I backed Michigan last week
against Michigan. Everyone look, I like Michigan. We've been doing rankings on my show, and I've had the number 4 all year. And this just seems like that spot. You look at the history. I think the last 6 top 5 teams to go into Kinnick Stadium, 5 of them lost outright. I don't think any of them covered. So noon kick, I guess it's 11 a.m. local. So, you want an ugly spot, there we go. I'd be curious to see. I'd be curious to see, guys, what the betting splits will ultimately be if the public's ready to lay that type of number with Michigan on the week there. Another spot for me that I'm curious about is Cal going to the Palouse up at Washington State. So Washington State, for those who watched it over the weekend, I mean, they had a victory just ripped away from them. And now they've got to turn around. They're at home, which works out. But you give up 29 points in the fourth quarter. You're up by double digits against a top 15 team. And now you got to play Cal. And it's just a pain in the butt to play Cal. Justin Wilcox finds ways to get covers. And, their freshman running back, Ott, dude can run, man. He had over 200 rushing yards last week. I thought that was a tricky spot for Cal against Arizona. They put up 40-plus against Arizona. So Cal plus the 4 is something I'm looking at. One game that's steamed up and I don't really want anything to do with now. Nebraska's at home against Indiana. I played that early in the week, so not a game that I necessarily want to get into. And then, I'll say this, a little more digging on this one. A Friday night game, guys. Middle Tennessee goes to Miami. They get the win. First time in school history they beat a top 25 team. Rick Stockstill, their head coach, played quarterback at Florida State. He told the media, all his buddies are texting him, hey, way to go. You beat Miami. This is incredible. And now they have to turn around and play the Conference USA defending champs and UTSA. And for UTSA, this feels like a good spot for them because, for those who know, UTSA opened the year against Houston, right? They needed double overtime. They lose that game. They travel across the country. They go to Army. They win in overtime. They come back home. They play Texas for the first time in school history. They're close at the half. They end up losing by 3 touchdowns. And then they finally got to sit back and exhale. They played an FCS team last week in Texas Southern. They beat them by 4 touchdowns. I think this is a tricky spot for Middle Tennessee. Short week, got to get it right back up. You're at home, which works out, but now everyone's singing your praises. Hey, what a win over Miami. That was incredible. And you've got to play, Frank Harris and this UTSA offense. So the market's actually backing Middle Tennessee. It opened 7 and it's bet down to 4. So I'll see where it goes. But I definitely like, me, Jared. I like letdown spots. I mean, this is, in my eyes, one of the biggest letdown spots of the week, right? You go to Miami and you're terrific. You had your quarterback threw for over 400
They looked unbelievable.
16 completions. So
they look like the old you running around, dropping points all over the place.
Tyler Van Dyke got benched. I mean, they were a disaster.
Yeah, early splits. Now, this is very early in the week, incredibly early in the week. So I don't want to read too much into it. But I'm starting to see a gap in the number of tickets on Michigan, which are high, and the amount of money on Iowa, which is high. And you can deduce there where the sharp money is going.
All the money, all the time. All the money. Well, you may look for letdown spots, but Tim, you never let us down, and we appreciate that.
Look at that.
On Twitter, at Tim Murray, the number 1 Tim Murray. Make sure you check out his show on VSiN. Always great to talk to you, buddy. I told you look great. Best of the wife and the baby, and continued success, man.
Zeno and Jared, always a pleasure, man. Talk to you guys soon.
Hey, bud. We'll talk to you soon.
Tim Murray of VSiN. Very fortunate. I got a chance to work with Tim a bunch in the past, and he's a great guy, and he's a lot of fun to work with, and certainly knows.
Totally agree.
Knows a ton of stuff. All right, before we get to our Pickswise website and the plays of the day, I want to remind you guys, Let's Bet It is brought to you by Superbook Sports. Go to superbook.com or download the app today. And this season, we're all rooting for safeties. That's right, this season, safeties, because Superbook will give you a $50 bonus on each safety scored this season. That's a $100 pregame bet on any spread or total. There's a safety in any game on Sunday. You get a $50 bonus. Visit superbook.com for terms and conditions. Jared, that takes us to our website, pickswise.com, and a 3-star play of the day. And we will get to our plays of the day. So what's up on the website?
Yeah, let's take a little refresh here. I saw Schmelter still got a pickup from this morning on the Orioles-Red Sox total. Keith has done a fantastic job with his 3-star plays in the past, so I would absolutely give that a look. We also have Ricky Diamond chiming in. If you want to bet the Korea Open, of course, Ricky, fantastic tennis handicapper. If you're interested in betting tennis, I would very much recommend to check out Ricky's Pickies on the Korea Open. He's got a 3-star play up right now on an outright. So we got a couple for you today. A little smorgasbord.
Jared, that brings us to our plays of the day. No football for us to look at, no basketball, no hockey, so it's back to Major League Baseball for you and I.
Oh man! All right, I did the math this morning. There is 133 baseball games left this season out of 2,430, which means for these Game of Thrones fans, my Nerfy watch is almost at an end. We are close. The sprint to the finish is here. We're going back to the well again today. I laid 10 cents for this Nerfy over at Stations here in town. You probably could find a similar price market wide. It's the A's and the Angels, all A's tonight, right? Caprelli Sandoval, 38-11 combined Nerfy record this season. That's almost an 80% hit rate, which is very solid. Both have fantastic data in the first inning. I won't get into the numbers, but you just have to take my word for it that it's really good. Combined since 2019, these guys are hitting at about 75% to the Nerfy. So not only this season, but if you widen the sample size as well, these guys have been very quality first inning pitchers over the last few seasons. Now let's get into the lineups. Oakland, not really much to write home about. They've scored 2 times in their last 11 games. The one thing I really like about this matchup is they're a bottom tier team in all major categories against lefties. Patrick Sandoval is a lefty. Now, the one part of this handicap that concerns me is James Kaprielian against this Angels lineup in the bottom of the first. Mike Trout's been really hot. Shohei Ohtani also there lurking. But Kaprielian's never faced Trout before. I think that's advantage pitcher in the first outing. And then you have really good numbers for Kaprielian against Shohei Ohtani. 1 for 12, no homers, 5 Ks. Overall, Kaprielian has very good numbers against this Angels lineup. 9 hits and just 47 at-bats, only 1 home run, 30% K rate, and a 161 expected batting average. So while the Angels lineup is the part of this handicap that concerns me the most, I feel good that Kaprielian's numbers have been good against the Halos. So we'll lay 10 cents for a Halos A's Nerfy late night. Apologies for making you stay up late for this one. But that's where we're going. First baseball bet in almost a week. So we're dusting off the Nerfy vibes tonight with the Angels and the A's.
To quote our co-host and friend, you'll love to see it. Thank you, Lauren Jabara. We miss you. All right. I will do a baseball bet, obviously, myself. We're going to go north of the border to Toronto as the Yankees and Blue Jays are playing. No, I'm not betting on Aaron Judge to hit a home run, although I do think it's going to happen on the road here at some point in time, hopefully sooner rather than later, and because the pressure is mounting on this young man, and you can feel it with every start. That aside, Yankees over 4 runs tonight at -105. James Taillon starts for the Bronx Bombers against Jose Berrios of the Toronto Blue Jays. If you look at the pitchers who have given up the most home runs in Major League Baseball this year, at the top, Josiah Gray with 37. Next is Garrett Cole of the Yankees. Third in Major League Baseball, you guess it, Jose Berrios. Now, most of those home runs have come against lefties, but still, so that's not a good sign for Aaron Judge. This is also a Toronto Blue Jays bullpen this year that has given up the 3rd most home runs of any bullpen in the AL. Yankees still need to get wins here to clinch the AL East, so obviously they're still playing for something. After a slow offensive night last night, expect some bounce back and baseball regression with the Yankees to go over 4 runs tonight at -105. So that's where I'm going. And yes, we'll keep our fingers crossed that Aaron Judge goes yard. I got to give credit to a lot of these pitchers, man. You watch every Aaron. I mean, I get locked in on every at bat. Like I stop what I'm doing and I don't have the game on. I'll just check the app and put on every at bat that he has. But I give credit to a lot of these guys, man. They are pitching to him. They're certainly not grooving him any fastballs, but they are absolutely not pitching around him. Kevin Gossman last night threw him slider after slider after slider and got him out a couple of times. But, nobody wants to be the guy who gave up 61. But in the same respect, nobody wants to be the chicken bleep who just throws him 4 pitches that aren't close to the strike zone either.
I think it's tough. Like, we're at a spot with him now where the Yankees have not yet clinched the division. I think they can do so tonight with a win because they're facing the Blue Jays. I think.
Yes.
I have a feeling after that is done, there will be a little bit of pressure off the Yankees lineup as a whole. And my guess is that's when it'll happen. Just a guess. Could happen tonight. But I have a feeling that it'll happen like in a very meaningless game sometime this weekend when the division's clinched and they're just kind of playing out the season. And yeah. But let's just leave it at this. I'm pretty sure last week we said that if you bet against him to hit a home run every night for the rest of the year, you're going to be profitable. I think that's fair to say that we're gonna be right on that prognostication.
As soon as he hit 60, you knew that getting to 60, 61 to 62 will be the hardest. If he hits 61 to 62, like in this game, I guarantee you he'll hit 65 before the end of the year. Like if he could bang out 2 in a game tonight, he'll probably hit 3 or 4 more because all the pressure's off him, right? He's already done it.
And I'd be willing to bet that if he does hit 61 early in the game, I wouldn't be shocked if he hit 2 that night.
Right, exactly.
It seems to come in bunches for him. I would be surprised, and I'll be honest. I wish that I had the cojones to actually bet no to the home run every night and roll it over, because we'd be doing pretty good right now. We'd be doing pretty good right now. Oh, it's 5 straight games since we did the show last week, and he hasn't hit one, right? Five. It's either 5 or 6.
5. I think we're on 6 now. But regardless, the fan in me wants him to do it, but the better in me is enjoying.
Exactly. We're both Yankees fans, so I don't want to. Right. I don't want to bet against that because I want him to do it, and I want to enjoy it when he does it. That's a heart thing. But if you want to talk just profit loss, we're going to be right. Like from that moment when the lights got the brightest, he's going to fail at that number because they overjuiced that number significantly to account for how much handle they are going to receive on that bet. And listen, that's betting 101. Like it was easy to really make that prediction, but I didn't want that to happen, which is why I'm not betting it.
That'll do it for us today here on Let's Bet It Again. Download the Pickswise app, available at the Apple Store and Google Play. Make sure you subscribe to the Pickswise YouTube channel as well. For Jared Smith, I'm Mark Zinno. You guys have a wonderful Tuesday. Best of luck. Go cash some tickets. Go get it. Go bet it. Have a great day.